how would a country that implemented anarchist communism exist inside a capitalist world? Now, firstly, hopefully it would not, like, we're not necessarily trying to create a stable system, long term stable, because we wouldn't want to exist as just one anarchist country, right? Because the idea is to spread, because capitalism causes injustice, and so it's like a moral imperative to implement it worldwide. But so like we don't need to kind of say, okay, this is how it will work and this will be stable forever and nothing bad will ever happen, because like ideally the point is it would only have to be in the period where we've implemented it in one place and are waiting to spread it to other places. But how could it be stable, like medium term? Because obviously the spread would take ages. How would it be stable medium term? Now, it would have to be large enough to be stable itself. And now Moth in the chat said it would have to be self-sufficient. I don't think this is entirely true. But basically, the way I envisage this in my head and like get around how I think it might work initially is if you just treat the entire country of the United Kingdom as like a black box, and things go into it and things come out of it in some way. Like we have imports and we have exports. And if you just look at the literal sum total of all of those things, like a certain number of things come in, like Milka, bars, chocolate from Europe that they don't make over here, and other things that we import that we don't create here. And we have a certain number of exports, like lobster. We make more lobster than we eat, I think. Or like Cadbury's, right? Like some of that's got to go abroad because Cadbury's is a really nice chocolate. Sorry. Now, sorry, I'm trying to get my train of thought in order. I'm so foggy today. So the entire okay, my train of thought is back on the rails. The entire country, we look at it as just this block that has some exports and some imports. And the reason we know that the country can like exist by itself is because it currently does. Like generally, we're not starving. Now there are starving people in the UK. Well, I mean, homelessness is more of a problem in this day and age than food shortages in this country. But we exist stably as a country now, like short-term stably. I wouldn't say stability is one of England's strong points at the moment, but the UK is. We do manage to like keep our population alive, growing in fact. And what we would do in anarchism is basically just try and replicate the existing supply chains as closely as possible. And so, from like in the capitalist world, from the point of view, like to the outside, England. Sorry, I keep saying England. I'm very Anglo-centric, and I don't mean to be. The United Kingdom would be effectively like a big corporation, like from the outside, that just had like one big bank account inside itself. Like if they treat from the outside England as the United Kingdom as a black box, it would still hopefully like we would treat the exports that the United Kingdom was performing before the revolution. We would treat those as like needs that we need to fulfill. And the stuff that we import would be like, we would just directly channel the money from the exports into purchasing the same imports. And we know that mathematically those sums have to work because they currently do. Like the UK is getting richer. So it must be the case that with all of our exports, we can pay for all of the imports. And all we're doing is kind of like unplugging the import and export pipes and rejigging all of our internal mechanisms to perform anarchistly, to perform under an anarchist framework, and still meet all of the exports as needs, and then purchase all of the imports. And so that the stuff that we have to import, like, I mean, like chocolate need, we can make our own chocolate, right? But like cocoa beans to make, there are some inefficiencies that we would be able to very quickly like rejig. But the first thing we would do is just go, okay, right, we're just going to replicate it wholesale. We're going to act as an island nation, and we're going to do everything from an anarchist framework inside, but we're going to make sure that our exports and imports remain the same, such that to the rest of the countries in the world, we appear exactly the same. Note to self, I need to talk about like embargoes and shit. Because someone pointed those out to me once, and I hadn't actually ever thought about that. I just kind of had assumed, oh no, the rest of the world will be fine with us doing this, and they'll still be willing to trade with us. So, yes, I will get to that. But for now, assuming that that's all fine, the starting point immediately would be that we just wholesale replicate, to the best of our ability, the exports and imports. And at that point, we have now created a system where we can iterate on those things to remove inefficiencies. It's like England imports so much of its food, but it also exports so much of its food. So like we'd be able to take a step back, look at it wholesale and go, well, okay, we export all this broccoli and we also import all of this broccoli. So, we could just, instead of doing that, we can just close the loop and do that all internally. And so we'd actually be able to be more efficient at existing if we implemented anarchism and was doing stuff decentrally. But basically, the way it would exist initially is that we would act like some sort of black box connected to the outside world, and we would treat our exports as needs that we need to fulfill, and we would use the external money that has no value inside the country. We would treat the external money, we would just channel it immediately into the imports that we need. Now, the two things I want to talk about then are like what I said earlier about embargoes from other countries, but secondly, the point that Amaz said about well, it's sort of a subtle point, but basically, like, at that point, money is still a thing. And you may end up with a case where people in the United Kingdom begin to hoard, like, euros. And you're just kind of moving the problem where you end up this sort of secondary black market that operates in euros, and it operates only in things that have to be imported. Now, this is not a problem in that we would be meeting needs and many wants initially, like say immediately after the revolution, right? Or whatever. Like, I don't want to keep saying the revolution, but I mean that is what I want. But whatever. We would be meeting people's needs straight away. Or we've got to a point where we are meeting everybody's needs, and a lot of like needs for luxuries as well, like a lot of wants, because the anarchist system would be more efficient and would be more equipped to meet these needs of people. At that point, the only black markets that could possibly form are for like non-essential things, like because we are constructing a system internally in the UK where like everything that people need is like sorted and provided for. black markets forming isn't a bad thing anymore, because the only things they'd be trading for are like certain luxuries, and yet like at that point that's a bummer if it's a particular luxury you want. But the point is that would only ideally be a temporary state of affairs, and everything else would be better. Like everyone would be being fed at that point, and nobody would be homeless and nobody would be starving, and like many luxuries would be absolutely provided for as well. So like the black markets don't become as much of a concern because they're not having life or death power over anybody, and people aren't like desperately trying to get like meat or something. It's more like one particular brand of chocolate or something. And this is something that's very key to address. Like I don't want to gloss over the idea that like there may be some specific brand of Japanese whiskey, like you love your Yamazaki 12 year, and it's your absolute favourite. It may be the case that having a revolution would cause a temporary dip in your ability to get that. Oh shit, I'm running out of time. I'll have to end it there. Okay, maybe I'll cover the others. I'll just post this now.